Wednesday professional development days that have been very successful and well received by the teachers. Art has a little update on the provision of student meals, because we have a week off next week, which we ordinarily would not be serving meals, but we will be. And then a couple of other matters, just some other little minor updates as well. So I'm going to start with the distance learning update. The buildings have shared the parent survey results with their teams, and they've discussed it. They've come up with some responses to the feedback. Even before they got the survey results, they already had some feedback, but now with the official results from the surveys, and they're working closely to monitor student engagement as being one of their top priorities. HAND has created student and teacher surveys to go further with that. We have an administrative council meeting tomorrow, and we're going to talk about the use of student surveys at the K-8 level, and what role those might play, and how maybe we can do that as well. Teachers will have input most definitely when it comes to that. And then primarily tonight, we want to talk about the grading process and what we're recommending. So I'm going to turn it over to Gail. Gail, did you have to share your screen?
No, I don't for this.
No, okay. Okay.
Thank you very much. I'd like to acknowledge all the administrators, because they've been working long and hard at really examining how we were going to approach this idea of grading. And I just wanted to provide a general context before I turn it over to the building administrators to go into a little bit more detail about the way we're approaching this on the various levels. We did, I think Katie reported last time we met that there has been guidance from the state that was provided that really gave a very broad, permissive approach to grading, encouraging by and large a pass, fail, incomplete kind of model. And we took that guidance and we worked with our Learn colleagues, and we also canvassed some of the districts in our DIRG to see how they were approaching it. And that's how we really arrived at our model that we have today. I would say that we're most closely aligned with Guilford in our approach, and that Guilford is pretty much producing very similar documents regarding approach as we are. So I'm going to turn it over to TJ Salutari to talk about the work that we're doing at the high school. And I want to thank him for his collaboration with all of his department heads and his colleagues in the DIRG and around the state in developing this approach. We really wanted to develop something that we thought was a win-win for students, and really take into consideration the various stressors that are present in education today, and also providing our kids with lots of options for the future. So I'm going to turn it over to TJ with my thanks.
Thanks, Gail. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, quite well.
Awesome. Thanks, Kirk. Sorry, Tom. I'll speak louder. So, Gail, thanks for the intro. I appreciate your efforts as well. This is obviously really complex at any level, but as everyone knows, at high school, that's where grades follow students and have a pretty significant impact. And as Gail mentioned, one of the things that we wanted to make really clear is to ensure that we gave an opportunity for students to have a fair approach to this and have some choice. We obviously are going to encourage them to speak with their parents, but in a nutshell, the trimester 1 and 2 were complete prior to the transition to online and distance learning. So we're in a good place for courses that ended either trimester 1 or trimester 2. For trimester 3, it obviously gets a bit more complex. And excuse me, what we are doing is we're giving kids an option. They will have an option to either select traditional grading, and they'll receive a letter grade that will go on their transcript and impact their GPA, or they will have an option for pass fail. And we took an approach of do no harm, where if a student actually ends up failing a particular course, we are going to list that as incomplete, and then have a discussion with the teacher, counselor, and with the student and give them a specified timeline, which could be different dependent upon the level of work that needs to be complete, where they can actually make up the work and change that incomplete that would have been a fail to a pass grade, which we think is very positive. One of the other pieces that we thought was important is that this is not an all or nothing. If a student has one particular course that they're working really hard in, or maybe not working really hard at all, and they are just passing, they could select a P for that course and have traditional grades for their other courses. We also didn't want to put pressure on students and parents to make a decision early, so we're giving them until initially the last day of the trimester, which will be June 18th. We also added a statement in our form that we plan to send out to parents and guardians and students that states once grades close, which should be a few days after, obviously grades have to be calculated by teachers and entered, we would still accept a pass-fail request from a parent or from a student, and we would make that change. Once we get past that date, we would say decisions are final, and we think it's a really fair approach. One question that some people had for a trimester course that meets during P3, if a student selected pass-fail, they would get a P or F, I would assume mostly a P, on their transcript, and there would be no impact on GPAs. When you look at some of the other courses that meet either 2 or 3 trimesters, that's where it gets a little more complex. We're looking at students who select the pass-fail option to have the grade from their first or second trimester be calculated into their GPA, and then the trimester 3 would be marked as pass-fail per their option that would not impact their GPA because it's just a pass-fail. Keeping in mind that students do not have to select pass-fail, so we thought this was a really fair option, and giving students the opportunity to see how the trimester unfolds, from now until June 18th was, in our opinion, really fair, and this would be able to stay in place if some really positive news happened and we actually returned to school this trimester as well. So that is a nutshell summary. And Gail and I would happily answer any questions you have, but we think it's a great approach. And just to share, we've had a few students reach out, really asking for this type of approach. They haven't seen it yet, so it was really positive to see students reaching out, hoping for an option, and a lot of students concerned that we would force them into a pass-fail, which isn't the case.
Thank you, TJ. Go ahead, Gail.
Just wondering if anybody has any questions regarding the information that was shared. Okay, hearing none. Oh, I hear Galen. I sort of hear Galen.
He's muted.
Yeah, I think you have to unmute.
There we go. Okay, thank you. I have less of a question than a something to jog my memory, and that was what's the deal with the UConn ECE courses at the high school?
So UConn, great question, Galen. Thank you. We actually created what we believe will be a frequently asked question document, and we asked teachers and counselors to share what questions they have and actually give us some answers as well. And that's one of the questions that's on the document that we do plan to send out. UConn advised against pass-fail as a final option for kids. And they put very specifically how they thought that could be detrimental to a student who's currently in high school being able to get credit from other universities. So we are going to be including that in the frequently asked question document. That will be a living document because I'm sure questions will come up over time.
Was there any thought to passing with distinction?
Because we're offering students the opportunity to get actual grades, we felt that met the criteria for passing with distinction, because you could have it impact your GPA.
Perfect, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And TJ and Gail, can you talk a little bit about how this will be communicated to parents? I know there's been a lot of interest, especially in the upper grades, high school in particular, about this. So can you talk a little bit about how you'll roll this out?
Sure, Gail, you want it?
Sure. So we wanted the opportunity for you to hear from each level tonight at the board level, answer any questions that you have, and then we were going to do a general address across the district and roll it out by the end of the week, which is in keeping with a lot of the timetables that we've seen in the region.
That's great. Thank you.
Sure.
Any other board member questions?
So is this the same approach that Guilford is having? Is that what I was understanding we're doing this, we're similar?
Very similar. Yep. Very, very minor differences between the two, but very much in keeping with each other.
And the state in general, from what I've been hearing through CABE, it sounds like this hybrid approach is kind of a nice option.
I think for it's in keeping with our DIRG. I think there are some communities where they have a lot lower participation in the high school courses that do impact that decision. Yep. So I'm going to have Catherine talk about the Polson approach, and then we'll move on to elementary. Catherine?
Thank you. So very much like TJ, we've got information from teachers, coordinators, being able to come up with what we think is the best plan. And I've communicated obviously with the high school and with the with Brown Elementary to try to have that continuum. Being in the middle, it is unique. There's no question about it. So we are looking for primarily two, but really three possible ways of rating students based on the third trimester. The first one, which I believe the majority of students will earn, is a pass. And that's where they show that they've demonstrated a certain level of performance, that the teachers feel like they've completed the assignments that they need to, that they've shown that understanding of certain concepts, that they warrant getting a pass for that class. An incomplete is that the student may have completed some of the assignments, but it might not be enough for the teacher to be able to say confidently that they've got that level of passing to be able to justify a pass. And then an NA, which wouldn't be available until the very end of the year, which really means that a student hasn't engaged in distance learning at all in a particular class. So like the high school, everything is done by one class at a time. The reason for the incomplete at the progress report is so that they still have the opportunity to work, to catch up, to do some assignments, show their proficiency and their level of knowledge. And the assignments that we come up with it's not based on a set number that they have to complete 3 out of 5 math assignments a week. It really is based on, are they showing us on our key assignments that are determined by grade level and by content area, that they understand that information. And if they do, then they would earn that pass. We think that they can catch up if they need to, if they're a little behind and need some more time. Like TJ said, they would have the time that they need, and we can always adjust the ratings at any point in time. So it's all based still on the Madison curriculum, and it's all based on the national standards, connecting everything that they're learning to those key documents. The final grade for a full year course would be based only on trimester 1 and trimester 2. So they would be weighted equally, 50% each, and that would be their average for the end of the year. If it's a 1 trimester course, it's only for trimester 3, then they'll either get the pass, incomplete, or NA, and that will be not only the end of trimester grade, but also their final grade for that course. Throughout all of the distance learning, there's regular feedback. That is, the parents can go in and look at Infinite Campus. They'll get a grade at the end of each week. And the grade would be either pass or incomplete to let them know how their child is doing. The more concrete information is really provided through Google Classroom on specific assignments of how they've done, what they need to work on, anything that they need to revise to be able to demonstrate that knowledge and understanding. We also think it's important for them to have progress reports still, which typically we do in the middle of the trimester. We've decided to do this the week of May 18th. So we have one more full week after the spring break where students can submit any assignments, And at that point, they should know where they stand, but we'll mail home to parents and to the families information about any classes that where their child might be earning an incomplete at this time, meaning that we're working with them. We're already doing phone calls, just like the high school, the counselors are involved, the administrators are involved, to try to engage the children who are having difficulty regardless of the reason. That's ongoing, but we feel it's important to send out this information. We know that parents are overwhelmed. Some parents are overwhelmed by emails, so we thought a letter in the mail may just have a different, send a different message as well. But it's certainly an ongoing process. It's not based on that one event. The other thing that we have eliminated for the third trimester is the honor roll. It just won't be in place. It won't hurt the students in any way. It'll actually could potentially help them in the future, but it's at this point it's sort of a neutral gain. So that would not be a factor at this point. And at the end of the year, we would mail out report cards as normal, being able to send home with information based on these grades, how the students are doing in each individual class. Are there any questions that are pertinent to middle school, to Paulson?
So there's only pass fail. There's not going to be a pass with distinction.
There is not a fail. We talked a lot about that with the coordinators, that we didn't think that the students would be failing. It's more that the system, I don't mean Madison Public Schools as a system, but the environment, the situation is not set up for kids without that proper training. And we've done the best that we certainly can in that situation. So we don't believe that a fail is warranted at this point. That's where the incomplete or the NA comes into place. And it's very difficult to distinguish between a pass and a pass with distinction for individual students at this point, that we thought a pass shows you've done what you need to do. You've shown us mastery.
I do want to add though that the opportunity for comments is still in the progress report. So that's where teacher can acknowledge any attributes of distinction.
Absolutely. And they're planning to do that. And in Infinite Campus, we have a huge bank of comments that the teachers have access to, but they also know that they can create additional comments that are pertinent to this situation that we can add, and they can use those if they would like to.
And how would this affect any of the students that, if they were sort of on the cusp about whether or not they would be going on to the advanced courses at the high school for freshman year, if they were, worried about whether or not their teacher was going to recommend them, because I know the recommendations already went out, but they always had the option to change it. So how would that affect that for any students that were possibly on the cusp, because the learning now is so different?
Great question, Diane. And I think the short answer is it won't affect them negatively at all. The placement was actually, the recommendations for their math class were done before this. So we worked with the high school starting back in January. So the guidance counselors came over, the coordinators came over, the students submitted their requisitions, their requests well before this even happened. So it won't have a negative impact on them at all in that whole process.
But not only that, TJ, you can probably confirm this, but we allow parent overrides. So it's really a non-issue when it comes to placement.
That is confirmed, Tom.
I would add to that we did some changes a couple years back to the science pathway that really opened up a lot of opportunities for kids in their freshman year. So it actually allows kids to go into a conceptual physics or a conceptual chem, as well as an honors bio or regular bio. So that those opportunities are open to all kids as well. That was the only other differentiation that we had in the past.
Right.
Any other questions for Paulson? Okay, I think Becky is speaking on behalf of Frank and Kelly in the introduction, but I know they're available for any questions as well. So
yes, good evening, everybody. I'll give you a quick overview of where we have landed in terms of reporting on progress for trimester 3 at the K-5 level. Like you heard from the principals that spoke before me, we solicited much feedback, layers of feedback from our teachers, our coaches on what they felt would be most meaningful to report on at the K-5 level. There's some aspects of our work with our young learners that make report cards and grading much simpler, but there's some factors that make it a little bit more complex. So we kind of started off looking at our current report card, what we use to report for trimester 1 and trimester 2. And really, for a multitude of reasons, we just really felt that it wouldn't be as meaningful or valid to still give the strength, meeting expectations, developing those S, M's, and D's like we currently give for each strand on our report card. And some of those reasons just have to do with we have pared down our curriculum. It is not our full curriculum that we're providing through distance learning. So some standards we can't report on. There's some families that are overwhelmed with 3 little ones at home and mom and dad working, and they're really only focusing on reading and math, and that's what we want for them. We have some families that, some children need more support from mom and dad, some need less. So just really trying to give honor to the fact that some families are in different places with this. So where we landed is kind of an alternative report card that would only be used for this special distance learning circumstance for trimester 3. Much like a regular report card, we will be reporting individually for each student and individually for each subject area. So on this new format, you will see the core classes of English language arts, comprehensive of reading, writing, and phonics. You will see math, science, and social studies. And then you will see a separate section for related arts classes. The classroom teachers, the core teachers, will be reporting largely in narrative format. So they'll be taking comments and feedback that they've already given throughout the trimester in their Google Classrooms. And at some point, just copying, pasting, kind of summarizing how students have done in light of our criteria for success. When it gets to related arts, again, we've had some families able to participate and some families that it's just been too much for. So we'll simply be indicating for those students that participated in our optional distance learning modules for related arts, just by indicating that they participated. And there's also a space for the related arts teachers to leave a comment if they want to give feedback as well. So again, a bit pared down, largely narrative, and a summary for core areas, and just an indication of participation for related arts. I don't know if Kelly or Frank have anything to add to that.
You did a great job summarizing that. I think it's most appropriate for our level.
It does feel very appropriate. You're right.
I just want to, repeat a point that Becky made and that we all talked about. And that was the importance of giving student-specific feedback. Because I know at times when you hear narrative, you imagine these are the content areas that we covered in math. These are the content areas we covered in reading. And that's not what we're describing here. We're talking about the actual feedback that is in the Google Classroom, but summarized in those areas.
Yeah. And I didn't mention, Gail, not only will be students be given specific feedback to them on how they performed in Google Classroom standards, teachers will all be setting each child off for summer with a specific goal for that child in reading and in math as well. Questions?
Just the same question I asked TJ. Becky, are you guys going to mail this information home to parents, or will it go by e-notify? How will we notify parents about this?
I believe we want to make sure that we're, at the K-5 level communicating in a similar fashion. So I know this is a topic of conversation for our administrative council tomorrow. And we'll make sure that we get the message out in probably a multitude of ways, as this is really important for parents.
I have a quick question. I know you guys rolled out the new email addresses for the K-3, I think it was, for the parents so that they could access the teacher comments. And I just wanted to know if you had any feedback from that.
Me personally, I haven't heard from my families, my teachers, of that it's really great or not working. And I usually tend to lean to the side of no news is good news. So we're always cautionary when it comes to giving a 6-year-old email But as far as I am, information I am privy to, that it's really been just helpful to parents to be able to get that notification when a teacher has left feedback in Google Classroom.
Agreed. I have not heard any feedback regarding that. I think along the same lines, no news is good news. Definitely if there was an issue, I would have that information.
And Katie, I would just add that over the next couple of days, we'll have faculty meetings via Zoom after our administrative council, go through that with our teachers, and then hopefully, and Gail could jump in by the end of the week, we will send that message out via e-notify and have that consistent message K-5 before the May break.
And I think
Thank you, Frank.
the only other thing that I just want to highlight again is that we are tracking participation in the classrooms and all levels, and that we have a team that gets weekly reports on attendance, and we have various ways that we follow up with those weekly reports. So we're looking for student engagement across the board, and we're following up if we see any student who has not been engaged by phone calls, both by teachers, written emails, guidance counselors, school administrators, and last but not least, written formal notification. So we continue to do that, and we hope that that keeps our student engagement numbers really high, which they have been so far.
And then the last thing we'll say is K-5 is we will not have any fails, even if we have students who aren't involved in the, because as Becky said, we've had some overwhelmed parents, families, kids. If they're not engaged, they share with us, maybe they're not going to do music or PE during this. They're not going to get an incomplete or an F. They're just not going to get, they won't get a P. They won't get anything.
I'd just like to make a comment. This is a really difficult time in education, and I think by the way that you have described your approach to making this decision on all the levels, high school, middle, and elementary, has been very thoughtful, compassionate, and empathetic. And I think that that is something that we need to remember during this time. And I'm very impressed with the decision making around this topic, and pass on to the coaches and to the teachers that it's really this is nicely done, and nice job leading administrators. Nice job.
Thank you, Kathy.
I think that's really well said. I think that the emotional and psychological impact of a fail during this period of time would be traumatic on top of trauma. So I think it was really thoughtfully done in a way to assess learning in a way that recognizes the unprecedented time that we're all in.
Thank you.
I have another quick question. Have we had any other families reaching out for more technology, and those families that have more than one student that initially, received a Chromebook for the first child, but I didn't know how we were doing with the rest of the Chromebook availability?
I know we got a couple in need of repair, but I'll ask the principals, have you had any others that have come for additional Chromebooks?
I continue to get requests, and I've honored every request, as well as multiple families, multiple people within a family. Sorry about that.
Becky?
Yep, same. We kind of went through our first round of Chromebook distribution where every family was entitled to one. We had enough to honor requests second for families with more than one child in the system, and those have all been honored. And I too still get requests of for Chromebooks. So ongoing process.
Frank?
Yeah, and Diane, one of the interesting things when we shifted totally from Zoom, to Google Meets, we did have a couple of people ask for Chromebooks because it's just easier, and we've met all their needs, and we still have additional ones in the building. We've met all the needs of multiple kids, as Becky and Kelly were saying, who may need additional ones, but no one has been told no, and we've had a few more in the last week when we made that shift.
And Catherine, you've been pretty stable?
We're in the same boat. If anybody needs one, we give them to them. We still have supplies available. And even if a parent reaches out and says, we're having difficulty, we might then initiate and say, do you need an extra Chromebook in the house? So anybody who wants one has one, and we have more available if they need them.
And TJ, you haven't really had much of an issue with the high school with that, have you?
Now, we've been averaging about one request a day, keeping in mind 9th and 10th graders have the one-to-one,
Yeah.
but for various reasons, my laptop broke or I dropped my Chromebook, but it's been pretty consistent, but we have a supply. We haven't said no once.
And we still have a pretty healthy stock, Diane. I think the way we approached it, as I explained a couple meetings ago, was our first tier of folks and then getting to that next tier. And by doing that step by step, I think we met everyone's needs. We're in pretty good shape right now. Tomorrow at Admin Council, we get the fun task of figuring out how we're going to collect all these and get them back to the building from where they originally came from for the summer. So that'll be interesting.
They can't be too restrictive.
Art.
Did we receive the hotspots that we had ordered, and were any of those given out, or?
We get half of them?
We got all of them now.
All of them now, okay,
We got
good.
them in two. We got them in 2 batches. We have a total of 10. We've issued 4 that were known requests.
All right.
Any other board member questions regarding grading before we move on?
But this is gonna take some effort.
Okay.
Okay.
So
Portrait of a graduate. So we have some time sensitive in a sense of before next year, we need some action, I believe, Gail. But maybe you could take the board through a little bit of a review of where we've been down this road and the importance of this in the district work.
Sure. First, I want to apologize that I couldn't give this presentation in its entirety at curriculum. That was the intent, but we had a little disjointed meeting time, so I'm going to give the presentation and a brief overview tonight.
I blame the facilities committee, just saying.
So I'm going to attempt to do a screen share, and if I'm not successful, then Wendy's prepared to do so as well. So let me see if I can do this and how that looks. How's that going? Do you see my screen? Oh, good.
See your desktop.
Okay.
Yep, there we go.
All right. So Portrait of a Graduate has been a group that has met over a period of time, and a group that has various stakeholders from around the district. We had board members involved, administrators, teachers, coordinators, all different levels, parents and students. And then we had a separate student feedback session after the end of a series of meetings that were both large group meetings as well as small committees that worked on this Portrait of a Graduate. So before we go too much further, I wanted to give you a chance to read this description of what a Portrait of a Graduate means. And this was a working definition that the group started in our first meeting after examining Portrait of a Graduate work from around the country and around the state, and then also their understanding and how their understanding evolved over time. So this definition is from the group and hopefully communicates what their feeling is regarding a Portrait of a Graduate. So this might feel very similar to some of the work that we've done in the past around what we call capacities. And in fact, there are some similarities, but the importance of Portrait of a Graduate is really founded in the idea that the world of work is changing and will continue to change. And I think there's no greater statement to that than the current job market that we are looking at in the next year or so. And it's really important that we look at not just the idea of knowledge, but the ability for students to develop skills that provide them with lots of opportunities and lots of different inroads to careers. In addition, Connecticut graduation requirements have changed. This is reflected in our current policy. And Connecticut graduation requirements that are impacted by a portrait of a graduate is really around this idea of a 1-credit mastery-based diploma assessment. So your next question is going to be, what does that look like? We've gathered information about what that looks like in some other districts, but in large part, it is encouraged that you look at the portrait of a graduate competencies as part of this 1-credit mastery-based diploma assessment. So this is something that we need to continue to develop once we have a portrait of a graduate, because it is informed by that document. And it's implemented by the graduating class of 2023 that needs to earn this. So response from our students, and I'll show you some pictures of who those students are and the names of those students, was, gee, we'd really like to know what that looks like. And we would like that to be further developed by the time we start in the fall, which I think we would like to provide as well. In addition, NEASC, which is the New England Association of Schools and Colleges, is going to be starting their evaluation with Daniel Hand completing a self-reflection piece starting in February of next year. I believe it's February. TJ will correct me if I'm wrong. One of the foundational elements is around the vision of a graduate. So you'll hear portrait of a graduate, profile of a graduate, vision of a graduate. It's all the same idea that they're going after in those words. So in the Madison portrait of a graduate, we've had 5 categories since 2014 that have been important skills that we have developed along the way. And the 5 general categories are listed to the right. And the work of the committee really examined these major categories and determined that the categories were consistent with the values that they see in Portrait of a Graduate and the values that they currently had for Madison students. So the idea that, broadly speaking, we want our students to be strong critical thinkers, creative thinkers. We want them to be able to collaborate and communicate. We also want them to have good self-direction and global thinking. Really still resonated with the committee as a whole. However, when we took a look at the descriptors, so the capacities underneath, that's where the bulk of the work really started. So our large committee sessions were held on 3 dates that you see up in the corner. And in addition to those large committee sessions, those were about a half a day each. We had smaller breakout committees that would work on some of the pieces that I'm presenting to you today. So that work continued well beyond these 3 large committee sessions. But you'll see I killed a few trees and used a lot of dots and post-it notes in this work. But the committee did a really great job. They poured through tons of artifacts. They collaborated and they created a lot of documents that you won't see in this presentation, but do exist and will help in terms of our communication. So in this bottom left corner here, you'll see the feedback after, I think, the second session, which was really taking a look at those broad bands up at the top of those 5 categories and really talking about what categories we felt strongly should stay and what categories we thought might be altered. And we did what's called a point distribution task, where everybody had a number of points and they weighed in on the capacities. So it equalized all voices around the table and everybody had a lot of input. So this is the original 2014 adoption. You'll see banded across the top the 5 major categories. And then you'll see that we had what I now refer to as the Fantastic 15. We had 15 different indicators, 3 under each category. And those are the original indicators. After the feedback sessions and after we read more and after we examined characteristics of various groups of students, it became evident that we wanted to change some of these indicators and we wanted to combine some, and we wanted to also deepen some of our commitment to some of the other attributes that we thought were important. So introducing our proposal for the portrait of a graduate, you'll see that the fantastic 15 are now down to the terrific 10. And you'll see some areas that look the same, but might be a little bit different when you get deeper into the descriptors. One of which, if you look at critical thinking, I'm gonna just quickly go through, you'll see that we now have a category that says inquiry. We didn't have inquiry before. We had what we called problem identification, we had analyzing, and we had synthesizing. There was a lot of discussion around synthesizing because we think that that is a really important skill. And that's why synthesizing is now baked into 4 of the descriptors that you see in the terrific 10. That in fact, each one of these is described in great detail with student-friendly language that are I can statements. And our student group actually helped us to pour through those statements to make sure they were clear, and they were also very evident of what you needed to portray in order to be successful. Another piece that changed is in creative thinking. You'll see this idea generation piece, and that took over a big amount of conversation. And under self-direction, a huge category that people felt strongly about was self-awareness, and that we really wanted to develop our students' ability to identify steps and strategies to persist and how to grow to know themselves better in terms of their strengths and their areas that they needed to grow over time. So there's more changes to these categories that are more subtle and in the I can statements. And I can certainly send that to the board, as well as a crosswalk that we developed between the old matrix and the new matrix. The student input session, actually on these posters that were placed around the room, our students took a look at the general category, and then they took a look at the I can statements. And you could see they wrote all over it. They put tons of Post-it notes and editing for us, and they really challenged our thinking. And it was a longer session than I thought it would be, and there was no hesitation on the part of our high school students to set us straight when we had gone astray. So we actually took all of that input and we regathered into a committee. We reviewed everything they said. We made changes again, which is the document that we're sharing with you tonight. So our accomplishments is that we really took a hard look at redesign. I have to say I shiver a bit when I look at the changes that came out of it, because of course we've done a lot of curriculum work around the 15 original ones. But we certainly see, a lot of value in looking at what the stakeholders' input was. And I think they just made suggestions for us to get better and stronger and clearer about what those competencies look like. They definitely eliminated some redundancies, they streamlined things, and they made sure that it was student and parent friendly. That was really important. So the background documents to this are very student and parent friendly. It's the portrait of a graduate work has been informed by state and national thinking. And we also developed a crosswalk between the old and the new. So these are our participants in the bigger committees. And you'll see that, thank you, Katie and Galen, for coming to our meetings. I think I invited everybody on the board, but I believe they were like in the middle of the workday. So I know that was hard for people. But we did have good parent representation, and the student representatives that are on this list actually introduced the work to the larger student group that we vetted this through. And these are the names of the student leadership representatives, and they're from all classes. And they were the ones who gave us even more feedback against our draft and made the final changes. So in terms of our timeline that came out of that committee, this is the exact timeline that the committee developed. So we're right on schedule and target. We were looking for a possible board adoption in April, but understand if that timeline might need to be adjusted. But we do need to put forth a lot of work at Daniel Hand to describe what the mastery-based diploma assessment will be, for our students to understand that completely in the fall, and for us to have a really good plan on that. And that would definitely go back to curriculum committee once it's defined. And also our PDAC committee, which is our professional development and our teacher eval system, also would need to review whatever changes there would be to that document, because their teacher evaluation system is based on the original 15 capacities. And certainly those changes would impact our teacher eval system. Our thinking was at the time that we would introduce the portrait of a graduate to our parents in the fall and our students in the fall, but to our faculty, we would want to be able to do that before the end of the school year, because many of them do make their goals and objectives around one of those capacities. All of us do. So that's my overview for all of you. And I'd love to answer any questions. I'm going to do a stop share so I can see everybody. I'm going to invite TJ and the other administrators who participated in that group to help me with any of the questions or to interject.
Gail, I had a question. Did you start this presentation by saying that NEASC is coming in the fall?
NEASC is coming, I believe, in February. Is that correct, TJ?
Well, when they come is a little bit different than the process. So we're in the phase for planning for the new NEASC accreditation process that's incredibly revised, to say the least. And we will be working on a report that is due in the spring of the 2021 school year. And at this point, I can't give you a definitive date because the trainings to get prepared for that have been recently canceled because of COVID-19. So if things go as planned, it will be in the spring of next year where NEASC actually visits, but there's a lot of planning and report writing that will be due prior to that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And just so I'm clear, the portrait of graduate, first of all, I loved participating in it. The students were beyond engaged in the process. The parents, I thought, as well, brought a lot of insight and perspective. It was really neat to be at the table with the mix of parents, students, teachers, administrators, and in true Gail fashion, there was lots of sticky notes to keep us all organized. So thank you for that. But just in terms of portrait of a graduate as a thing, it is all tied into NEASC as well as the state requirements for graduates, correct? Can you explain a little bit more in depth about how those tie together?
Yeah, so if you look at the mastery-based diploma assessment, and I took my information from CAPS, they did an 8-series brief, an 8-step brief on the new change in graduation requirements. And one in particular was around the addition of the 1 credit for mastery-based diploma assessment. And in that brief, they referenced the portrait of a graduate work from NEASC. That should be considered as part of that mastery-based diploma assessment. NEASC, I think I put it up on the screen in that presentation. I think you have it in your board packets. Has, I think it's an indicator 2, TJ, I don't know, indicator 2, that specifically mentions portrait of a graduate as well. So it's not an uncommon term around the state and around the country.
And Gail, if I could just jump in, there are certain standards and indicators in the new NEASC process, which is, for the most part, brand new this year. Some schools have been wrapping up the old process this year, but schools that are in the same position, and that's totally based on just timing of the visits, have to align with specific, they're called foundational elements. And if a school, if a high school does not have a portrait of a graduate by the time the visit occurs, it will receive a 2-year warning. And if that's not completed by that 2 years, then the school would not get its accreditation. So it's a really significant part of the accreditation process, and it's new to the revised NEASC format.
And am I correct that there's also an expectation that it's reflected in the curriculum and in the expectations for that?
100% correct.
And so just so I'm clear in terms of the board's role, we're a little bit behind schedule thanks to a global pandemic. How can we best help? What would be helpful to you in terms of moving this work forward?
I think, certainly the board's response by adopting the proposed portrait of a graduate would be helpful for the high school to continue to develop the mastery-based diploma assessment and also start to prepare for that self-reflection report for NEASC. I think that portrait of a graduate, I mean, if you looked at naming the original document in 2014, portrait of a graduate, it has changed significantly through this process, or somewhat significantly through this process, even though the categories are the same. So I do think that over time, you grow your thinking about portrait of a graduate, you grow information and evidence as to what students' needs are. I would say that on our radar, this idea of self-direction and self-awareness was not a predominant theme when we did this work in 2014. But very clearly it was in the forefront of everybody's desires in this iteration. So I think portrait of a graduate might be moved along and informed by information as everything we do in education. So I don't think it's a stagnant document. I do think it's a consistent document that we build off of. Therefore, the categories remain consistent by consensus of the group because the categories were still important across the time span, but other things might change.
Yeah, this is Greg. I raised this question earlier and I think I've heard some pieces of it, but I'm wondering if you could synthesize. I'm curious about portrait of a graduate in our state of transition. So what are the pros and cons of adopting this month versus waiting until a new superintendent can weigh in as well? Obviously, the process is or can be iterative, and we could have updates at any point to the process. So that's clear, but I'm just trying to get a sense of the timing. I've heard about NEASC in February and the process to get to NEASC in February and things like that. But what slows you down? What allows you to keep going? What are the advantages and disadvantages?
Sure. I think the advantage of continuing with the portrait of a graduate work, one of the advantages is honoring the list of people that have been involved this year and have provided their input to create the newly revised piece that I had shared with you through this presentation. I think the other piece that is an advantage is that the work keeps moving forward rather than pausing and waiting for a new superintendent to be named. I don't know how long that process is, and definitely the board has probably a better idea of what that time frame is. But in looking at what's happening globally and what's happening across the state, I don't think any incoming superintendent would be shocked at anything that's in the portrait of a graduate or feel that it is not something that would be a workable document for their work. That being said, I think the disadvantage would be that they're not sitting around the table with the stakeholders and being part of that process. I think that anyone who was present there, and the administrators were, and some board members, it's a lot of work and a lot of thinking and a lot of planning that goes into it and a lot of revising. So I'm sure that an incoming superintendent would be wishing that they were part of that process. Does that answer your question, Greg?
Yeah, thanks, Gail. I think that's the interesting balance for me, and it's not about the work that's been done, because it's certainly been a ton that's on display here. It's just a matter of and we didn't, obviously, as you described, get to discuss this in committee. From a curricular perspective, are we going to have even a small amount of change to it in the middle of the process? And it sounds like you're anticipating that there would not be. Is that right?
Ask your question again. I'm not sure if I understood it.
I'm wondering, so if I have the timeline right, you're looking to adopt this because you'd like to introduce it to sophomores next year. Is that correct?
We'd like to clearly work with the high school team in defining what the mastery-based diploma assessment would be. So our sophomores would have clarity in what they need to do in order to earn 1 credit by the time they graduate. And in addition to that, we would like to have some work documented for NEASC when they come for their initial visit in the spring around the portrait of a graduate, because that's one of their indicators as well.
And you're referring to our sophomores at this moment. Is that correct?
Our
or fall
sophomores, class of 2023.
Okay. And if it was not adopted, this is what I'm trying to get at. If it was not adopted, you would not be able to, in the fall, begin working on that as a team and providing that information to the sophomores in a timely fashion. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, I can't imagine how we'd be able to give the level of clarity and definition to that 1 credit that it deserves for our sophomores. I think, and TJ was there, and I'm trying to think, I think Tom was there as well, to the student impact or the student debriefing, where the kids were giving all the input. The major thing that they talked about over and over again is, what does this look like for me? What does this mean for me? What do I need to do in order to demonstrate these attributes, and what do I need to collect? Parents, on the parent end, they were concerned that it would be a shadow box moment, where they would have to urge their kids to do something exceptional in order to have a body of evidence for a 1 credit demonstration by the senior year. So if you look at this as an important moment for kids to consider how they've grown in a couple of these attributes, then I think it's really prudent to define it more for them by the time they're in their sophomore year. You could certainly land in something in their junior year and they have 1 year to demonstrate. I don't think it's as meaningful, nor do I think it's as impactful as what it could be.
Sure.
Do you want to weigh in on that at all, or how do you see that?
That's very helpful. So it sounds like it's a balance between something that will allow students to get a good start on it beginning next year versus any small changes that might occur under a new superintendent that would affect any work that's underway. So I just wanted to get clarity on that balance between those 2 things. So that's helpful.
TJ, hold on 1 second. For what it's worth, I was superintendent, still am, and I sat at those meetings, and I acted like anybody else at the committee level. I don't know how a new superintendent would come in and dictate the portrait of a graduate work that had over 30 adult fingerprints on it, plus the different student groups. It's the same process that we did. We had 3 education summits involving 50 or so community members back in 2012 and 13. So maybe, but I don't think you would see a huge departure with a new superintendent. And I think if you look at the trend across the country, I think it's pretty consistent with the theme of what districts are going after with those student outcomes. Just my 2 cents. TJ?
And Tom, to your point, I served on a collaborative committee visit to a local high school. I can't share where. Brian Bodner did as well. We were both trained in the new NEASC. NEASC certainly does not, and no offense to you, Tom, at all. They do not want to see this type of process be dictated by a superintendent of schools.
No.
This is a collaborative process. Gail put together a mighty team, to say the least. And that is driving the effort. A new superintendent coming in and making significant changes or any changes would be looked upon poorly by NEAS during the collaborative visit. And they are expecting us to have some type of document and a plan to share when they come in April or May of next year. So this is a really important step in moving forward with this process. And again, the superintendent could be involved in the process, but by no means do they dictate any part of this process. And the visitors from NEASC will ask groups of people those specific questions to see how this was formed and how many people were involved. And that's where Gail's documentation is going to be incredibly helpful. I've saved not all your sticky notes, Gail, but all your presentations, because those will be evidence as to how this document was created when we present to NEASC.
And I can build on that, TJ. Gail, when you started the process earlier this year with TJ and created those series of meetings, I remember you asking me how the current vision statement was crafted and how the capacities were written. And that was with TJ, as you're saying, that was with 50 community members. Remember, I shared with you, Gail, the biography of each person who was involved, or the bios of everyone that was involved. We kind of maintained that as an archive. Similarly, you got to have a lot of fingerprints on stuff.
I've never been through a NEASC accreditation. I can imagine that continuing to move forward with this would be a welcome, something that would be welcomed by a new superintendent entering a job, that the process has begun, and we're not starting behind the 8 ball. From what I'm told, it's pretty intensive process. Any other questions or comments on Portrait of a Graduate? Okay.
Okay. Moving on.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gail. Great work. TJ, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. So the board had approved professional development days as were recommended, not days, half days, from 11 to 2. If you recall, during the month of April, once we got the distance learning up and you know what, I missed something here. I want to make a comment here before I do that. She's too humble, so she won't say this, but the work that was done taking our curriculum documents and making them into learning modules for our teachers and our families and our parents to use was really just an incredible lift. And Gail has been invited to present at 2 national webinars. One is on April 30th with the New York State Association for Computer and Technology in Education. The acronym is NISCATE. And the second one is with the Research for Better Teaching, and that's coming up in May. For the New York Association of Computer and Technology Education, just briefly, the description is, when COVID-19 shifted learning from school to home, how did one district leverage their adopted curriculum to create a level of equitable experiences in a digital platform? This webinar shares the district level strategy from Gail Dolling-Kench, Assistant Superintendent, Madison, Connecticut, so forth. A story describing how the Madison Public Schools developed their emergency project plan born out of a multi-year curriculum design process. We are far from perfect. I don't know anyone can be perfect doing this work, but it has been outstanding, and I think it's got to be recognized. And 2 organizations have recognized Gail's work leading that, and she'll be presenting at national webinars coming up in the next couple of weeks. So congratulations, Gail. Nice silent, look at that silent applause. I like that.
Great job, Gail. Thank you.
Nicely done, Gail.
Congratulations, Gail. So proud. Nice
Now I
job.
can move on to professional development. We've gotten really good feedback from the administrators, from the teachers. And one of my primary questions was, has it really disrupted the student and teacher learning process and interactions? And I think it's been more of a value. So our recommendation is to continue with that 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. on Wednesdays, where the students are online, the teachers are offline. When we get back from our spring break on May 13th, that Wednesday, for the next, I believe there's 6 Wednesdays, so we get to June 17th. We could put that, I know the board meeting may shift its focus next week, so we're not asking for action tonight. But Katie, if it is going to shift to a lighter agenda, if the board is okay, I'd like to put that on as an action item.
Tonight or on the 5th?
On the 5th is fine.
That's fine.
Yeah, that way.
We
if
can
there's
have a
questions-
very brief meeting.
Yeah, if there's questions or concerns in the interim, we can field those and at least give people an opportunity. I don't want to put it on your agenda tonight to vote on it. It's not an emergency.
Thank you. I think that's great.
Art, we've got a few minutes here. I want to move the agenda along here, but I do know that next week we typically would not be serving meals, but given the increased need, our week 1 lunch and breakfast count was about 17. By week 6, we were up to 110, 111. So the need is definitely there. And you have arranged for services so that we'll provide that next week still to families who are in need, correct?
Correct.
And we'll be working with Joe Bracco from Chartwell's, and we have our current staff that'll still be there to deliver that, even though we're shut down for classes.
That's correct.
Okay.
Will we communicate that? Will we communicate that? So can we communicate that online to families so they're aware?
We will.
Yes.
We definitely will.
Yeah, that was a yes from Zoe too. Thanks, Zoe. Great. Okay. And I just have a couple of real quick ones under other matters. Art, can you give a really brief update on Munis? So
Yes.
This is not a really sexy topic, I'm sorry, but this is critically important. It's the software infrastructure for human resources, for finances, payroll, and we had an accelerated timeline to get done by July because the current system would no longer be supported. And we've been through this story a number of times, but just to refresh some memories, and Art and Heather and Stacy and the team have kept the ball moving. I know, God bless you, you've been able to do it remotely with the training. It's a very difficult training process, but Art, can you just give an update on where we are at Munis?
Yeah, in a nutshell, we're, if we had our druthers, we would have taken the calendar year approach for the HR payroll side of it and the fiscal year approach for the financials. Well, as it turns out, as a result of the pandemic and the closure, we've had a couple of setbacks on the HR payroll side of it as far as our anticipation of training everyone that needs to be trained remotely. There's a lot of end users that would need to learn how to use an employee self-service portal. They'd have to enter hours very differently, things like that. So we spoke with Phoenix, the legacy system. The company is Power School that owns Phoenix. And they have agreed that in our case, they will extend the coverage 6 more months for us. So it's a very good break for us, I think. It's going to give us a chance to, take a breath and roll it out properly, roll it out a little bit more in a more robust fashion with more bells and whistles. So I don't want to waste a whole lot of time talking about it. I thought I'd show you a 39-minute video and a 72-slide presentation on this, but I'll cut it short here. We're going to move out to just January 1st, 2021 as the payroll HR implementation time and leave July 1, 2020 as our general ledger financial system.
Yeah.
Good.
Any questions on Munis? Okay, my last point is just more of a heads up where I think we'll be I'm quite inspired by this, seeing a very positive petition to name a room after one of our former teachers. As you know, it was most unfortunate, quite heartbreaking. We lost a very special person in March, Dave D'Alessio, who's special not just to the school system, but to the entire community. I think probably the most unfortunate thing from my perspective is that it happened right at the outset of the COVID outbreak and crisis. And I still feel that we haven't truly recognized what a human being he was, let alone a teacher. A special family, just a very special person, born and bred in Madison, went to our schools. We gave quite an illustration of all his accomplishments and his impact in the community. But there has been a very, very heartfelt movement. As you know, he was involved in the wrestling program to name an attempt to name the wrestling room after him at Polson, where the high school and the middle school teams compete. So Catherine approached me. We really wanted to memorialize Dave the right way. Our original idea was to have a service at Polson. Not a religious service, but a service to recognize him. And we didn't get a chance to because of what happened with the virus. There was a memorial at First Congregational Church on March 14th, I believe, the day after we shut down. But this is truly a very special man, a very special opportunity for us. So, Catherine, I know you've received support to try to build momentum for the first step is the petition. There's a board policy on this that we'll follow, obviously. I don't know if you had any thoughts you wanted to share.
I think you summed it up perfectly. I've been approached by several staff members and parents who are interested in, both current and past, who are interested in naming the wrestling room after Dave. We would follow the Board of Ed policy, which the first step would be to get 100 signatures of people in support, which I think honestly, we posted on Facebook, it'll happen in no time at all. So
right.
Yeah, so that would be the first step, but obviously I'd want you all to be aware of that people are interested in doing it. So they wanted to do this a while ago. I said, put the brakes on, we've got to wait for the right time and focus on, what we need to do at this point in time. So that would be the first step. And then there would be 10 letters of recommendation that would be coming your way from either coaches who worked with him, Craig Semple is the athletic director, parents, current students, former students. Again, I think we'd have people banging at our door to write letters in support. And then the actual ceremony or dedication of the room is sort of on an unknown timeline at the moment until we know when we're going back. So we could start the process, but obviously we wouldn't do anything official until the time would be right.
And Tom, if I could interject just with a couple of things.
Go right ahead, Frank.
And having worked with Dave, but what some of the board members may not know, Dave went to hand, Dave went to Brown, Dave went to hand, Dave wrestled at hand, Dave was, went back and coached at hand. This has been his whole life. And so this is not a coach from a community for a few years. This is a guy who wrestled at Brown, wrestled at hand, coached at hand. And even when he went into his leadership, he got his own 92 to kind of get into that curriculum leadership. I remember sitting down and one day he said, "I just want to coach wrestling in hand." And so that was in his DNA.
So great opportunity for us. And I just wanted the board to be aware of it in advance. And as I said, there is a policy. We'll follow those steps in that policy.
And if you have any questions, feel free to let me know, let Tom know. I'm happy to include you in the process.
Thank you. What a fitting honor.
And
Thank
that's
you.
it for superintendent's report, Katie.
Good Lord. Okay, thank you. So moving on to board member comments. I have a couple. So if there's nobody else, then I will go first. Just a couple of updates. Last night, I sent the board an email, but last night the Board of Selectmen voted to postpone the school facilities renewal plan that was scheduled for October. And obviously, given the current situation that we're in with the global pandemic and whatnot, it has shifted our attention to issues of health and safety. And I think we can all agree that, given the economic uncertainty that we are facing moving forward and with a fiscal ask such as this, a capital investment such as this at this time, probably the climate is definitely not right. It would be a disservice to the taxpayers as well as to the project itself, which we know we've put many years into. So they voted last night to postpone it. I made a statement at their meeting last night that acknowledged the wisdom in that decision and our support as a board in that decision, but also was sure to recognize that while we are in a period of uncertainty right now, the pandemic isn't stopping time, and our facilities are still in need and will be in need, and that in the coming months, and hopefully once the dust settles and we have some more clarity on where we are headed, that we will be able to sit down as a tri-board and be able to address the need. We still have aging facilities. The costs of repairing or addressing those needs only get more expensive as time goes by. So I believe that we will be able to work together with the Board of Selectmen, the Board of Finance, the full tri-board to develop a plan that makes sense moving forward, keeping in mind all of the things that the tri-board working group did so well, the fiscal piece, the economic piece, the other projects within the town, as well as the educational needs of our students. So I just wanted to give the board that update that they did take action on that last night. And the new, I don't know, it's not a new referendum, but the new, they had said that they will do something in 2021 with the referendum. So there'll be much more to come on that. Thank you, resolution. Any questions on that? Okay, so then the next thing is I sent the board an email regarding the budget. Tomorrow there is a public hearing on the budget. I think it is fair to say that our board came up with a very lean and responsible budget for this cycle. But given where we are and this fiscal uncertainty, we are working together. I've worked with the tri-board or the tri-chair leadership group to address the concerns in the community about where we are fiscally. And there has been some recognition with both the town budget and in the Board of Ed budget that there might be a need to reduce further. And so we have been asked to voluntarily look at our budget. The town budget reduced all of their additional asks. So the Board of Selectmen side reduced all of their additional asks. And the request was made for us to voluntarily reduce our additional budget requests as well, which equates to $127,000 in our planned and cycled maintenance fund. The hope is that this funding can be restored when ECS funding comes back to the town, and we hope that that will happen. But it is my feeling, and certainly everybody can weigh in, and my hope is that we can take action on this tonight to provide some clarity to the town and respond to the needs of the town currently, that we can take action on making this reduction tonight.
Can I just make one just quick clarification?
Please, yes.
Yeah, and I think it was just a slip of the language. It's from the maintenance accounts, not the planned and cycled maintenance.
I'm sorry. Thank you.
That's all.
Yes.
Yeah, Katie?
Yes.
Yeah, I certainly agree that, and of course I'm a little biased with respect to this. I think we, as a board, brought to the town a very fiscally responsible budget, a 1% increase, 1.09% to be more accurate. But in this particular environment, I would absolutely support our doing more in support of the overall town's fiscal situation. And to the extent that we can, I mean, not to the extent, and we can, or we are in a position, I think, to reduce by 127,000 the budget that we've put forward, and hopefully that will work with the reductions that have come from the town side and enable us to maintain a very stable mill rate or tax situation for the town's residents in what is becoming a very troubled economic environment, and not one which is likely to be resolved anytime soon based on recent economic forecasts that I've been seeing. So I would very much support our voluntarily moving forward with a further reduction in our budget ask. I think it's great, and I would like us to take action on that tonight.
Thank you. And just to clarify, that would bring our budget down to, and Stacy, I know you're on, correct me if I'm wrong, but it would be a 0.087, I'm sorry, 0.87% increase.
Correct.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions on that?
Katie, I'll just note that we can move on that at any time during the agenda. So if you want to just tackle that now for the sake of folks who might be on the line, that can be moved.
Greg, I had already added it as budget number 12, but okay, why don't we just do it and then I can relax. So I would like to move to reduce the Board of Education's previously recommended budget by $127,000 for the coming year.
So move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries. Okay, thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
Moving on to committee reports, curriculum and student development.
Okay, curriculum report. We met last Tuesday and we covered the district grading policy, which you've heard, the student engagement survey. The first item on the agenda was the awarding of the Career Technical Education Perkins Supplemental Enhancement Grant. I'd like to recognize and commend Dan Grenier for his outstanding work in that field. He's won awards, and in this case, Dan had won a $46,000 grant for the purpose of enhancing the career and technical skills of secondary students who elect to go into technical education. There's a very good PowerPoint in the board packet. If you'd like to take a look at that, but among the highlights in the grant, it's going to be used to upgrade some of our equipment, our furniture, and develop opportunities for our students to connect with local manufacturers, conduct job shadowing, go on field trips, and perhaps listen to guest speakers from those manufacturers. The last item on the agenda was concerning the initial planning for a return to the schools. We all know this is a moving target, but the milestone dates for that would be, and Gail, please step in and add color or correct me if I'm misstating something. The milestone dates would be June 19th, July 30th and 31st, and August 17th and 18th. Some of the issues are going to be as per normal to prepare for the convocation. Other issues will concern things like reteaching if necessary, evaluating student progress and engagement from the distant learning modules, just the logistics of how to get back to school. And that's pretty much it. If Gail, if you'd like to add anything more than that.
Yeah, I think just on the social emotional aspect of student engagement after social distancing is going to be a tremendous challenge as well. So we'll do some planning in advance of those dates, in particular of how to meet student needs and how to look at those beginning weeks of school, both in a social emotionally appropriate way, as well as an assessment kind of an opportunity as well. So thank you.
Thanks. So that's the end of my report. Are there any questions, discussions? Wonderful.
Great job. Thanks, Galen. Communications.
The Communications Committee has not met since our last board meeting. No report.
Thank you. Facilities.
Thank you, Katie. Facilities met on April 21st. Bill McMinn took us through an agenda which was largely focused on what's happening in the buildings post the closure. It was a very insightful meeting. Bill covered, first of all, the projects that he has out for bid and bid projects that have been received by his office for various projects going on in the buildings. We spent most of the meeting, though, really covering the active work that Bill is taking and taking advantage of the current situation to tackle a number of projects in Brown, Ryerson, Polson, and Hand, many, if not all of which would not be able to, he would not have been able to get to until the summer. So a lot of great progress. I won't go through the list, it's fairly extensive, but it's been Bill and his team have taken great advantage to get to some of these projects. Now these buildings, it's not that they're empty. So the committee did ask Bill to cover what some of the protocols are for traffic in these buildings, which he addressed, and Tom also peppered in some observations about how they're regulating, particularly for the teachers who need to get in to run some of their classes through the classrooms, how they're maintaining the physical distancing requirements. Bill also answered a number of questions about protocols to keep the staff safe, right down to telling us a little bit about some of the materials and agents that he's using to clean the buildings. So really kudos to Bill and to the team, both for really advancing the ball on a lot of projects and doing so in a conscientious and safe manner. When we convene again on May 12th, certainly it's going to be timely to talk about what the future projects are. Certainly based on, as Katie, as you pointed out, the facilities, there's still some immediate needs. So Bill will be taking some time on May 12th to walk us through some of the future planning. I think we also wanted to make sure that we put on the agenda in the event that there's a longer term closure of the buildings, what that might look like for the rest of the academic year. So again, our next meeting is on May 12th. Any questions, or if I missed anything?
Sounds great, Tom. Thank you.
And a report.
Finance Committee. That's you, Kirk. Turn the light on.
Thank you, Katie. Finance Committee has not met since our last board meeting. We will meet again later in May once Stacy has the budget, the estimate for this year's budget, given all the data that is currently outstanding with respect to transportation, for example, expenses associated with building closures and so on. So that information will be, she'll have a better handle on that later in May, and we'll meet to discuss it and then bring that to the board. End of report.
Okay, thank you. Personnel.
The Personnel Committee met to discuss the National Association of Government Employees. They're the cafeteria folks. Later in this meeting, we will bring forward our recommendation to the board for us to take action, as their contract is slated to expire June 30th, 2020. End of report.
Thank you. Policy.
Just two items to discuss. One is that you have a third reading on the agenda, policy 1140, distribution of materials. You've seen this for quite a while now, and hopefully it's pretty clear we haven't had any additional questions, but if there are any, please raise them. The committee also met tonight to discuss policy 6146, graduation requirements, and to pull out a portion of that policy and move it into a separate policy, credit for online courses. And Tom, I will leave the rest of that up to you.
Am I muted? Oh, no, I'm not muted. Okay. Yeah, so the primary reason for the policy was brought forward to the board is that Shipman has been advising their districts across the state to look at their online credit policies. And we do have language in the graduation policy, it's very limited. So Shipman has proposed a model policy, and a lot of districts are adopting it. And what that policy does is it opens up the opportunity for, it does say during the COVID-19 crisis, but it also opens it up to any other emergencies that may arise in the future that cause a shutdown, that there is latitude for credit-bearing distance learning to occur so students can still graduate. So the recommendation that I had for the policy committee was to delete the paragraph on the online credits in the graduation requirement policy, and then also concurrently adopt a brand new model policy on online coursework, which doesn't have a number yet, but that would be before the board. The urgency is not so much that it has to happen tonight, but I did request that we waive the 3 readings that we have as a normal course of protocol for the board, because we do want to make sure we take care of our current seniors and can adopt that policy sooner than later. So if the board is okay with that, Wendy will send out those, the red line version of the graduation requirement 6146 and the model policy for the board to review. And Katie, if it's okay, maybe next Tuesday night, we can have that on as an action item.
And
Sure, of course.
the committee did recommend that we take both of those actions to amend the policy, to add the new policy, and to recommended that the board waive the readings. It'll be up to the board to vote on that, though.
Later in the meeting, right, Greg?
No.
Or do you want to add that now?
Next week's meeting. No,
Gotcha.
we do that next week. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Any questions about that? Okay, and a report.
Superintendent Search Committee.
We have now sent out all the requests for proposal to the executive search firms that we are considering for use in assisting us in the selection of a new superintendent for the school district. We have also determined that given a typical timeline for such a search, that it would be appropriate for us to have in place an interim superintendent while that activity was taking place. And so we are also in the process of identifying and selecting an interim superintendent. End of report.
Oh dear. Okay, thank you. Board of Selectmen Liaison.
You skipped learn.
Oh, I did. I check marked too early. Sorry, Diane.
It's okay. No
Scott's not
report.
with us anyway. Oh,
No
you don't?
report.
Okay. All right. Oh, he's back. Okay. Good timing. Scott, you're up.
I don't have a huge report because I think you sort of stole my thunder anyways with respect to the things that passed last night at the Board of Selectmen meeting. So we obviously have been busy with the budget and pushing it forward to the Board of Finance, and Jean and team will take it Wednesday night to hopefully get us to a budget via the governor's orders that will then represent the public's vote. So hopefully we'll have a budget very soon. The Board of Selectmen really had been very much focused on, as you can imagine, given the scenario presented to us in town, the health and safety of the public. And you know, I think that has certainly steered any and all recommendations, decisions, and focus of the current administration. So I know a lot of you have been involved in some of the work that we've been doing and appreciate all of your efforts. I did just want to call out a very huge thank you to the administrators, the teachers, you know, everybody who's been working so crazy hard for our children in town, our students. It was so appreciated. the pivot that, Gail and team, you guys have done with respect to online learning is just simply remarkable. And, I see it every single day in my work, pivoting to online learning and see the magnitude of what has to happen. And candidly, the work that you guys have done is just frankly incredible. And I'm giving you a virtual golf clap right now, but thank you so much for all the things that you guys have done. It's pretty magical. So you guys should be very proud. That's it. End of report.
Okay.
Galen,
Yeah,
I recognize you.
Thank
Oh,
you.
I can't do that.
That's all right. Scott, you reminded me that I was remiss in not mentioning the great teamwork that's going on. In particular, Dan Grenier has been printing face shields using the 3D printers. And that has been a collaborative effort. He mentioned that in our curriculum committee meeting. And I just would like to put that up to the public. So, and add that to my report.
I forgot about that, that too, Galen. So thank you for remembering. Okay.
And Katie, actually, I realized I forgot to mention something too. So can I put my hand up again? Sorry. So in the process of getting to where we are with the budget too, obviously our 3 chairs of the 3 boards have really been collaborating quite a bit to make this happen. And I want to thank Katie and Jean and obviously Peggy for all the hard work in getting us to the position that we're in. I know it has not been easy, and your work is incredibly appreciative. So thank you. And to report again.
I can't tell if I'm muted. Am I muted? No.
No, you're talking.
Thank you. I'm also grateful to Peggy and Jean. And we got a lot of hard work ahead of us too. So we're lucky to be working together. We are moving on to the consent agenda. Can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Diane, thank you. Emily. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries. I need a motion to approve policy 1140, distribution of materials.
So moved.
Is that Diane or Violet or both?
It was me, Diane, or Emily.
Diane.
Pick one.
Okay. And it doesn't need a second because it came out of committee. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries. I need a motion to approve the minutes of the April 14th, 2020 Board of Education meeting.
So moved.
Oh, I saw you first, Tom. Second,
Second, Diane.
Diane. Just beat Kirk out. It's the square that's lit up that I look at. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries. I need a motion to approve the approval of the 1-year extension of the NAGE contract that Violet discussed.
So moved.
Thank you,
Diane.
Diane. Second.
Second.
Oh, does it need a second? No, it came out of committee.
Right.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Just
Opposed?
backwards for a second, that 1-year extension was without any sort of changes in salary or benefit.
Yes, I will read it. Approve a 1-year contract extension for NAGE with a 0% wage increase from July 1st, 2020 through June 30th, 2021. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
You oppose? Tom? Was that just a delay? No, you approved. Okay. All in favor? Any abstentions? Okay, motion carries. I need a motion to approve the non-renewal for the 2021 school year. Motion?
Can we
This is then,
take that
this,
one?
so, yeah, well, let's just get a motion and then we'll do that in discussion.
Okay,
So move.
Thank
second,
you, Kirk. Who seconded, Diane?
Violet.
Oh, Violet, sorry. Okay, so discussion. Tom, I think this was in your memo, but you might want to address the non-renewal.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's what it is. Thank you.
Okay.
I read it.
Oh, so no discussion?
No, I just needed a reminder. Thank you.
You got it. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries. I need a motion to approve the adoption of Carl D. Perkins Career and Technical Education Supplemental Enhancement Grant.
So moved.
Second,
Is that you, Galen?
yes.
Thank you. Discussion?
I think that's wonderful. I'm so pleased with that. I think it's great.
I
did a great job.
concur, and any grants are good grants. So thank you for all the hard work. They're not easy to get, so we appreciate them. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries. I need a motion to approve the transportation contract amendment.
So move.
Violet, I got you first.
Uh-huh.
Second,
Second.
Kirk. Discussion? Any questions? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries. Any old business? Any future agenda items? Meetings and dates of importance were attached. And finally, I need a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second.
Second.
Violet, you win. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to all the administrators for joining us tonight and special guests. We appreciate it. Good night.
Thank you, everyone.
Safe and healthy.
Thank you.